Ever get that weird feeling like something's just off with someone close to you? Not in a big, dramatic way, but in the little moments, the ones that feel quietly wrong. Like suddenly you're doubting yourself more than usual. Your confidence feels shakier. One day you're fine, the next you're walking on eggshells around someone who's supposed to care about you. If that hits home, you're not alone. And you're definitely not imagining it. Here's the thing, manipulation doesn't always show up loud. It doesn't come with flashing lights or warnings. It can look like care. It can sound like support. And before you realize what's happening, you're giving too much, trusting too fast, and slowly losing parts of yourself. This isn't just toxic behavior. It's quiet, psychological control. And if you're not careful, it can wear you down before you even see it happening. Let's make something clear. Being manipulated doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. It means you trusted someone who didn't deserve that trust. That's on them, not on you. But here's what is on you. Learning to see the signs. The quiet red flags. The ones that don't shout. They whisper. Because once you start spotting those patterns, you stop being easy to manipulate. And that's what this video is here for. We're going to break down 8 of the most hidden signs that you're being manipulated by someone toxic. Some of them might surprise you. Others might feel a little too familiar. Either way, you need to know them. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you understand it, you start getting your power back. Quick thing before we dive in, if this video speaks to you, hit the like button. Leave a comment with your thoughts or story. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. And hit subscribe if you haven't already. That's how we keep showing up with content that tells the truth, no sugarcoating. Alright, let's get into it, because this first sign, it's one of the most common and one of the most overlooked. Confusion is a weapon. There's a kind of manipulation that doesn't scream. It whispers. It doesn't show up with yelling, name-calling, or obvious lies. It shows up in little moments that don't sit right. Moments that make you pause, then second-guess yourself. That confusion, that's the beginning. It starts small. They say something that feels off, just enough to make you stop and think. You bring it up gently. They brush it off. You misunderstood. Or worse, they laugh, not just at the situation, but at you. So now you're thinking, did I overreact? Maybe I was too sensitive? And this is where it gets dangerous. Because once they realize you doubt yourself, they don't need to be aggressive anymore. All they have to do is stay inconsistent. Today they act like they care. Tomorrow they're cold, distant, irritated. You try to figure out what changed, what you did wrong. And you can't. That's the trap. They want you spinning. Confused. Off balance. Because when you're confused, you're easier to control. You've probably heard the saying, actions speak louder than words. But manipulators flip that. They say the right things, loving, supportive, kind. But their actions never really match, and instead of trusting your gut, you silence it. Why? Because they've trained you to think they know better, to believe your instincts are the problem. We once heard a story about a woman and her best friend. She shared everything, her wins, her fears, her life. And that friend always knew what to say. But over time, the support started coming with side comments. Compliments that felt a little too sharp. And every time she tried to talk about it, she got laughed at. Or told she was making something out of nothing. Eventually, she just stopped bringing it up. She kept her doubts to herself, and that's how it works. Not all at once, but bit by bit. Until you're stuck in emotional quicksand and you don't even know it. Here's the truth. You can be strong, smart, confident, and still fall into this. Because confusion doesn't attack your ego, it works around it. It makes you question everything. Your choices, your memory, your feelings, and that kind of inner chaos. It keeps you tired. It keeps you quiet. Now, let's talk about why this works so well for manipulators. When you don't trust yourself, you become easier to guide or rather control. They don't need to push you, they just keep you uncertain, and when you try to get clarity, they give you fog, vague answers, mood swings. Suddenly, you're more confused than when you started. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked away from a conversation wondering what just happened, apologizing for something, but not really sure what you even did? That's not random. That's not bad communication. That's manipulation through confusion. It makes you live inside the question, is it me? Am I the problem? And once you're stuck in that loop, you're less likely to speak up. More likely to defend them. More likely to say, they didn't mean it. And way more likely to ignore what it's doing to you. Let's be real. Healthy people don't make you feel like you're losing your mind. They don't leave you anxious every time you hang out. They don't flip their energy every time you try to express yourself. Healthy people are consistent, maybe not perfect, but stable. You feel safe around them. Not like you're constantly watching your step. So here's your first real tool. Start paying attention to how people make you feel. Not just when they're being sweet, but when you're unsure or confused or shut down. Ask yourself, how do I feel after I talk to them? Because that feeling, that's the clue. That's where the truth lives. Blame flipping. Let's talk about one of the most frustrating and exhausting signs of manipulation. You bring up something that hurt you, and somehow you end up apologizing, not for what you did, but for what you felt. You open up. You try to explain something real. Maybe you even practiced how to say it so it wouldn't start a fight. But instead of being heard, the whole thing flips, and now you're the bad guy. If that's been your experience, that's not miscommunication, that's strategy. Here's how it works. Some people can't handle being wrong. They won't own mistakes. They refuse to take responsibility, so instead they flip it. They turn the focus back on you, your tone, your timing, your delivery. Suddenly it's about how you brought it up, not what they did. They make you question your reactions. And over time, every single conflict ends the same way. You're apologizing. You're explaining. You're trying to prove that your feelings are valid. Meanwhile, they're sitting back, untouched, unbothered, unchanged. And here's the wild part. They don't always do it by yelling or getting angry. Sometimes it comes through guilt, through silence, through that fake woundedness like, wow, I guess I'm just a horrible person then, so what do? You comfort them. You drop your truth to protect their ego, and that's emotional blackmail. We got a message from a guy once who said this dynamic lasted years in his relationship. He thought things would get better if he just communicated more clearly. He tried everything, staying calm, being open, giving space. But every time he brought up an issue, the same thing happened. He left the conversation apologizing. He said it felt like being on trial. And eventually, he started to believe maybe he was the problem. Even though deep down, something didn't sit right. That's the power of blame flipping. It doesn't just confuse you, it rewires you. You start shrinking. You stop asking for what you need. You edit yourself constantly to avoid being wrong again, and they know that. They count on it, because if you're always explaining yourself, you're not paying attention to what they're doing. Let's be clear here. Real accountability takes emotional maturity. It takes guts to say, you're right. I messed up. But manipulators don't want growth. They want control. And one of the fastest ways to keep control, make sure you're never safe to speak up. It's subtle sometimes. They won't scream, but they'll get cold. They'll sigh. They'll roll their eyes. They'll act like your boundaries are attacks, so instead of calling them out, you keep quiet. You take the hit. You try to be better. But here's the truth. If someone never takes ownership, not once, not ever, that's not someone you can build anything healthy with. That's someone who will always keep the spotlight off themselves and make you feel like you're too emotional, too dramatic, too needy, just for trying to talk about what's real. Let me ask you this. Do you feel like you're always defending how you feel? Like no matter what you say, it somehow becomes your fault? If so, that's not communication. That's manipulation. Because love doesn't make you walk on eggshells just to express yourself. And accountability doesn't come with punishment. Bottom line, it is not your job to carry someone else's emotional weight. It is not your job to fix everything or apologize for having feelings. Peace that only exists when you're silent. That's not peace. That's control. Two faces, public versus private. Behavior, one of the most disorienting signs of manipulation is this. The person you're with, the one you trust, has two different faces. In public, they're charming, polite, funny, thoughtful. People love them, but behind closed doors, it's like a switch flips. They're cold, sharp, dismissive. And suddenly you're wondering, which version is real? Spoiler, it's the one you get when no one's watching. This isn't an accident. Manipulative people know exactly what they're doing. They build a perfect image. They care about how others see them, because that image is their shield. If everyone thinks they're amazing, then when you finally speak up, you're the one who sounds bitter, confused, or unstable. That's the trap, and it works, because over time you start doubting yourself. If they're so kind to everyone else, maybe it is just me. That thought right there, that's how isolation starts. We heard from someone once who spent 4 years in a relationship like this. Her partner was the life of the party, made everyone laugh, helped people out, so thoughtful, in public. But in private, he would ignore her, mock her, use sarcasm that cut just enough to hurt, but soft enough to deny. And when she brought it up, he'd say, "You're too sensitive." Or, "Why do you always make things such a big deal?" That contrast made her feel like she was going crazy. This is the thing. That two-faced behavior causes a specific kind of damage. Because not only are you hurt, you feel like no one would believe you if you told them, so you stop trying. You stop talking. You protect them, instead of protecting yourself. They know what they're doing. They know how to turn on the charm when it matters. They'll compliment your friends, help your coworker carry something, smile at your parents. Then come home and act like you're the problem. One of the biggest red flags. They treat strangers better than they treat you. It might sound small, but it says everything. The way someone speaks to a server, the way they talk to someone who can't offer them anything in return. That's where their real character lives. If they're respectful out there but cold to you, that's not just stress, that's not normal in long-term relationships. That's selective behavior, and it's a sign. See, toxic people perform kindness because it protects them from accountability. So if you ever hit a breaking point and speak your truth, they've already planted this image of being the nice one. And you? You're just too much, too emotional, never satisfied. It isolates you, not just emotionally, but socially. You feel alone in your own story. So let's say it clearly. Real connection isn't about image. It's about consistency. If someone treats you with respect in private and public, that's real. If they only act decent when there's an audience, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance, and you're the one paying the emotional price for their role. Start paying attention to how they act when no one's clapping. When no one's around to impress. When it's just you, because that's where the truth is. And if you keep bouncing between two versions of someone, the one who charms the world and the one who chips away at you behind the scenes. It's time to stop making excuses and start asking the hard question, why am I still allowing this version of them into my life? Dismissing your emotions. Let's talk about one of the clearest signs that something's not right. How someone reacts when you express your feelings, not during a fight, not in some huge emotional outburst, just regular, honest communication. You say something like, "That hurt. I felt ignored. That didn't sit right with me," and instead of listening, they shut you down, they roll their eyes, they sigh, they call you too sensitive. They make a joke out of it, or they say, "You're overreacting." It might seem small at first, but over time, it's devastating, because eventually you stop speaking up. Not because you're not hurting, but because you already know how it's going to go. You say how you feel, they deflect, you hurt, they mock, and you're left wondering if you imagined the whole thing. That's not a healthy relationship. That's emotional erosion. Little by little, it wears down your sense of self. We remember someone who told us about her ex. She said he never yelled, never got aggressive, but every time she was vulnerable, he twisted it. She once told him, "I felt hurt when you canceled our plans." And he laughed. "Relax, it's not that deep." After a while, she started saying things like, "Sorry, I'm probably just being emotional," before she even finished her sentence. That's what this does. It makes you apologize for feeling. You edit yourself, not because you've grown, but because you've been trained to stay silent. And that's exactly what they want, because when your feelings don't matter, they can do whatever they want, without ever being held accountable. You stop calling things out. You stop setting boundaries. You just keep shrinking. And here's the worst part. You start to think you are the problem. You start wondering, am I really too emotional? Was I being dramatic? Let's make this clear. You are not the problem. The problem is someone who can't face the impact of their actions. So instead, they make you question your reality. Healthy people don't punish you for being honest. They don't always get it perfect. No one does. But they try. They care. They listen. People who care about you don't need you to tone down your truth. But emotional dismissal, it's sneaky, it's quiet, and it's easy to excuse. It can sound like a joke, or just being honest, or you're reading too much into it. But the result is the same. You feel small, unheard, alone, and that turns into self-doubt. Then numbness, then isolation. So ask yourself, do you walk away from conversations questioning if you were wrong just for feeling something? If yes, pause. That's not love. That's manipulation. Your emotions are not mistakes. They're messages. They're signals. They are valid. And if someone keeps brushing them off, they're not trying to understand you. They're avoiding responsibility. Because if they truly heard how you feel, they might have to change, and they don't want that. So what do? You start by believing yourself. You stop apologizing for being affected. You stop letting someone else's discomfort become your silence. Because emotional safety, that's not a luxury, that's a need. Envy disguised as concern. Let's talk about something that feels subtle, but cuts deep. It's what happens when someone close to you starts treating your success like a threat. You get good news, a win, a breakthrough, something you worked hard for. You expect excitement, support, even a simple, "I'm proud of you." But instead, there's a shift. They pull back. They go quiet. They drop a weird comment like, "Hope it lasts," or "Don't let it go to your head." They say they're just being real. But what they're really doing is planting doubt. That's how envy shows up when it wears a mask. They won't say, "I'm jealous." They don't have to. The energy says it for them. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it. you'll start shrinking yourself to stay close to them. We spoke to someone who started a small business from scratch, worked nights, pushed through setbacks, finally started seeing results. She told her closest friend. The response? No excitement, no support, just, yeah, but that space is already super competitive. That moment told her everything. Not everyone claps when you grow, and when you're surrounded by people like that, you start doing the shrinking for them. You downplay your wins, you hide your ambition, you start making yourself smaller to keep the peace. But here's the truth, toxic people don't always hate your success. They hate what it reflects back on them. Your progress reminds them of their own fear, their own stuckness, their own effort, or lack of it. So instead of cheering you on, they punish you for evolving. Maybe they stop reaching out. Maybe they get colder, or they act like you've changed, you became the problem. Let's be clear, real friends celebrate your rise. They don't feel threatened by it. They don't treat your goals like competition. They lift you up. They challenge you to go even further. But toxic people, they only liked you when you were struggling, when you were easier to relate to, more manageable. When you start growing, they start disappearing or tearing you down in subtle ways. And it hurts more when it's someone you've known a long time. You make excuses for them. They're just stressed. They're going through something. But if it happens every time you succeed, it's not stress, it's resentment. And that energy, it's poison, especially when it comes wrapped in fake concern. You've changed. Just don't forget where you came from. It's great, but don't get ahead of yourself. That's not humility, that's envy in disguise, and often it comes from the people closest to you, not enemies, not strangers, but real ones. People who smile when you struggle and sulk when you shine. Let's say this clearly, you don't owe anyone your dimming. You are not arrogant for wanting more. You're not selfish for being proud, and you are not wrong for outgrowing people who won't grow with you. So ask yourself, when you share something good, do they get quiet? Do they find a way to bring you down a notch? Do you feel guilty for your progress? If yes, you need to take a step back, because people who truly care about you, they light up when you do. When help comes with strings attached, let's talk about a kind of manipulation that wears a smile. It looks like support. It feels like generosity. But underneath, it's about control. Some people offer help, but it always comes with strings. At first, it feels genuine. They show up when you're struggling. They offer advice, time, maybe even money, and you think, wow, they really care. But then it shifts. Suddenly you're hearing things like, after everything I've done for you, or you wouldn't be where you are without me. That's not support. That's leverage. This is how emotional debt works. They help you, but you never stop paying for it. It's not direct. It's not, you owe me. It's quieter than that. It's the guilt, the subtle pressure, the way they mention their sacrifices every time you try to make your own decision. We had someone share a story about his older brother. This guy helped him a lot, got him a job, co-signed a lease, even lent him money when he was down. But later, anytime he tried to do something on his own or disagree, the brother would say, "Don't forget who was there when no one else was." Translation: loyalty means obedience, and that's the trap. You feel like you can't speak up, can't push back, can't set boundaries, because doing that feels ungrateful, especially when the person who's doing this is close. A partner, a parent, a mentor, someone who's supposed to be on your side. And here's the tricky part. You probably do appreciate them. You probably do care. But the moment they start using that care against you, it's no longer support, it's manipulation. They keep a scoreboard, not because they want you to win, but because they want to remind you who's in charge. They bring up the times they saved you, not to celebrate your growth, but to keep you feeling like you owe them something. So if you try to speak your truth or ask for space, they hit you with guilt. This is how you repay me. But here's the truth. Real kindness doesn't ask for a receipt. People who truly love and support you, they give because they want to. They help because they care, not because they want power, not because they want control, not because they want you to feel like you owe them your voice. Let's say it clearly. You can be grateful and still say, this dynamic doesn't feel right anymore. You can appreciate what someone did for you and still refuse to be controlled by it, because the second help turns into guilt. It's no longer help. It's a leash, your empathy used against you. Empathy is one of your greatest strengths, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a trap. Toxic people can spot empathy a mile away. They see how much you care, how you try to understand, how you give people the benefit of the doubt, and instead of appreciating that, they exploit it. Not by accident, on purpose, because they know if they act like the victim long enough, you'll carry the blame. You'll carry the weight. You'll carry them. It starts small. A bad day, a story from their past, some pain that tugs at your heart. You step in, you listen, you care. Of course you do. That's who you are. And in the beginning, that care feels like connection. But then it changes. The crisis never ends. The drama keeps coming. And the more they mess up, the more you feel responsible for fixing it. We heard from a woman once who said her ex used to tell her, "No one's ever cared about me like you do." Every time she brought up something that hurt her, he'd spiral into a story about his childhood, his trauma, his struggles. So instead of holding him accountable, she ended up comforting him for hurting her. She said eventually, she felt more like his therapist than his girlfriend. And when she needed support, he wasn't there. He was too tired, too overwhelmed, too busy. But never too overwhelmed to take more from her. That's how they trap you, by making you feel like walking away would make you the villain. Like caring less would make you cold. Like if you stop showing up, you're giving up on someone who needs you. But let's be clear. There's a difference between someone who's struggling and someone who's using their pain to manipulate you. People who are genuinely struggling, they take responsibility. They try, even a little. They own their impact. Manipulators, they hide behind their wounds. They weaponize your empathy. They make you feel like loving them means saving them over and over again. But here's what they won't do. They won't show up for you because their empathy has limits. Yours doesn't. And that's exactly why they chose you. So what do? You stop confusing love with self-sacrifice. You stop calling emotional exhaustion commitment. And you stop letting guilt keep you in a place that's draining your spirit. Here's the truth. You can care about someone and still walk away. You can be empathetic and still say, enough. You can be kind and still protect your peace. Because love doesn't mean carrying someone else's chaos forever. And if you flipped the script, if you needed the care, the patience, the grace, would they show up? If the answer is no, then it's time to stop bleeding for someone who wouldn't offer you a bandage. When love feels like a weight. There's a kind of relationship that looks like love on the outside, maybe even feels like love in the beginning. They say all the right things. They check in all the time. They make you feel needed, important, essential. But over time, something shifts. You don't feel seen anymore. You feel drained, like you're doing the emotional work for two people. And no matter how much you give, it's never enough. That's not love. That's control, dressed up as care. When someone constantly demands your time, your energy, your attention, but gives you nothing real in return, what you're experiencing isn't connection. It's emotional dependency. You become their anchor, their therapist, their constant support system. But where are they when you need help? Nowhere. Or worse, they flip the moment. Your pain becomes a reason they're suffering. So you end up comforting them again, even when it's your turn to be held. We got a message from a guy who shared his experience. At first, his partner's constant texts and attention felt sweet, caring, romantic, but soon it turned suffocating. If he didn't respond fast enough, she accused him of not caring. If he made plans without her, she acted abandoned. And every time he tried to create space, she'd hit him with, "You just don't love me the way I love you." That's not intimacy, that's pressure, and it's exhausting. If every message feels like a test, if every phone call feels like you're being emotionally monitored, that's not a relationship. That's emotional labor in disguise. And it leaves you tired. Tired people don't set boundaries. Tired people don't ask questions. Tired people stay, not out of love, but out of guilt and survival. And that's exactly what manipulators want. Because once you're exhausted, you're easier to control. They don't want a partner. They want someone who will carry their emotional weight, even if it breaks you in the process. Ask yourself this. After spending time with them, do you feel lighter or heavier? Do you feel safe or drained? Do you feel more like yourself? Or like someone who's constantly performing, pleasing, proving? Because love shouldn't feel like you're carrying a load you can't put down. Real connection doesn't leave you empty. Real love isn't built on emotional exhaustion, and someone else's neediness isn't proof that what you have is deep. It's proof that what you have is unbalanced. You have the right to rest, to breathe, to take up space in your own life. And you have the right to say, this is not what love should feel like. Because if the only way to keep someone stable is by losing yourself, that's not love. That's ownership. You're not weak for feeling tired. You're not cold for pulling away. You're not selfish for needing space. You're human, and you're allowed to protect your peace. Taking your power back, if you've made it this far. Take a breath. That already says so much about you. You care about your peace. You care about the truth, and more than anything, you're ready to protect yourself. That matters. So let's pull it all together. We've talked about how manipulation often hides in plain sight. It doesn't always show up in abuse. Sometimes it shows up as confusion, as people who say all the right things while doing all the wrong ones. We talked about blame flipping, how every argument somehow becomes your fault, how you apologize, not for what you did, but for how you felt. We looked at double lives, the charming public face versus the cold, dismissive private one. We broke down what happens when your emotions get dismissed, how your truth slowly gets erased and your voice gets smaller. We explored how jealousy can wear the face of fake support, and how people who claim to care secretly resent your growth. We exposed how help becomes a weapon, how people keep you stuck by reminding you of what they did for you. Then we talked about your empathy, how it gets used as a leash, how your kindness becomes their favorite tool. And finally, we called out the pattern of emotional exhaustion, where love becomes a job, and your needs don't even make the list. So now the question is this: what do you do? Here's the first thing: believe yourself. The second you start seeing these patterns, you don't need to wait for permission. You don't need everyone to agree. You don't need more proof. You already feel what's off. That's enough. Stop explaining your pain to people who caused it. Stop hoping they'll finally get it. Some people know what they're doing, they just don't care. You can spend years trying to get through to someone who already made the decision to ignore your boundaries, your voice, your worth. Or you can decide that your peace matters more than their approval. And that decision? That's where everything starts to change. Let's make this clear. You are not too sensitive. You're not too much. You're not overreacting, you're waking up, and waking up is the beginning of healing. You deserve relationships where your feelings aren't twisted into flaws, where your boundaries aren't seen as threats, where your love isn't taken for granted. You deserve connection that's real, support that goes both ways, and safety, emotional safety, that you never have to beg for. Some people will never own their behavior. They'll keep spinning the same story, charming everyone else while slowly breaking you, but that doesn't mean you have to keep playing along. You can choose to leave, to say no more, to stop making excuses for people who keep hurting you, because sometimes healing isn't about fixing the other person. It's about finally choosing yourself. So here's the truth. You're not stuck, you're not broken, and you're not alone. You're just waking up, and that is your power. If this video spoke to you, like it, comment. Tell us what part hit hardest. Share it with someone who needs this message. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. This space is here for people like you. People who want truth, not fluff. Healing, not perfection. Growth, not guilt. You've got this. Keep going. You're not behind. You're just starting to see things clearly, and that changes everything.